Hey everybody, it's Phil Gates. What is going on? Welcome to the show. This is Today's Musician with Phil Gates on YouTube and on Facebook simulcast. So we're going to have some fun today. We're going to talk about some cool things about your mix. And we're going to touch up on a few things that we did last week as well. And then we'll dive into this week with the mix, okay? So you're going to see me peeking over to the side here so that, if you have a chat going, leave comments, ask questions. It's interactive. So this is, you can certainly go, hey, I have a question about this with my mix, or I have problems with this with my mix, or something like that, or actually anything about the music industry. It's fine. This show is about, the 5 principal pillars of music, which is touring, it's health, it's finance, it's live performance, and it is gear and keeping your gear up to date and making everything function so that you can do your shows, which is pretty important, right? Okay, so let's jump into a little bit of last week's show. Last week we talked about different kinds of microphones, the 2 primary kinds of microphones, which are dynamic and condenser microphones. And we talked about some of the mic patterns with that, with the cardioid pattern and with the hypercardioid pattern and the omnidirectional and the figure 8 pattern. And all of these patterns are cool for different ways of picking up the signal, because a microphone is kind of like a photographer's lens. It's how we are capturing the sound, just like how they capture light and how they capture a picture. We capture the picture of the audio that's in front of us, right? So let's go just a little bit back over. We talked about, the microphones that are out there. This is actually, I'm going to put a little crossfade on there. This is the 421. This is a dynamic mic. This is a great vocal mic. This is the U87. Okay, and then we have like some vocal mics. This is the one I use, the Sennheiser mic. And then we have the typical usual suspects of the SM57 and the SM58. Okay, and so these are your usual suspects, these kinds of microphones, not necessarily these exact models, but these kinds of microphones are the ones that you're going to run into a lot, or if you're not already using them, these are the ones that come up a lot when you're doing things. So, and if you're watching the show and you want to jump up and say hi, feel it's perfectly cool to say that and say where you're coming in from, So, just jump in. I'm going to look at the chat here and see what's happening with things and see what comments are coming up. And, yeah, hey, what's happening, Bodo? See, Bodo's here checking out the show. Way to go. All right, so I'm going to be watching this as well as, watching you and seeing what's happening. Okay, so last week, in addition to the microphones, we talked about some basic signal path that is going on when you are recording and what is on your mixer. Okay, and just to recap, those typical usual suspects, you'll hear me say that a lot, our input gain. Okay, you're always going to have that. You're always going to have an EQ section, whether it's 3-band or 4-band or shelved or parametric or whatever you're going to have. You have that capability in the EQ, right? And then after that, you're going to have your aux sends, maybe 1 or 2 on a smaller mixer, and 8 or 10, 12 aux sends on a bigger mixer, or in a digital console. It can be crazy numbers. So, that's how to get to the effects. And then after that is usually a pan knob to decide where in the stereo picture you want that audio to be. And finally is a fader that's going to give you the volume. Okay, so I'm actually going to check out something here. I'm going to try and pull up a screen so that I can kind of show you what's happening in real time. So, and actually I'll do a little picture in picture here. So this will be A and this will be B. Okay, cool. All right, so this is not a typical session, but it's one of my sessions. This is from the song New Kind of Funky off of the record The 12 Rhythms. So this has a lot of cool things, but what I want to point out here on the screen is some of the different elements that are going on with the track, right? So for instance, let's say on some tracks I might have, these are actually little groups to where I can break them out and then show what's going on. So I have a channel EQ on this. So this is your basic EQ, okay? And you can see that there are different bands of EQ. These are called EQ bands, okay? And this is shelving, and this is para, and this is full parametric in the middle, okay? So, I'm sorry, this is low pass, parametric, low pass, shelving, parametric, shelving, and high pass on the very left-hand side. So you can see the bands are labeled across the bottom as to what frequencies their center point is, or the Q, or the quiescent point is what the term actually Q means. And so then you can adjust these filters and raise them up and lower them down, or decide how much you want to, like that's at, like around 2500 hertz. But you can decide, I just want to notch out just a little bit, and I want to like really kind of bring it down. So you can make it really delicate, like some surgical stuff, or you can stretch it out and go, oh, okay, I want a little more of this, and make it more broad. Okay, so that's in a Q of an EQ section. Okay, and then in the next thing I want to talk about, actually I'm just going to go full with this. Let's see, and just, yeah, there we go. Okay, so the other things I want to just kind of show on a typical channel strip, let's just pull up some things, would be a compressor. Okay, and there's different kinds of compressors. Here's one that's really popular, and there's different things to a compressor, and I want to talk about the difference, what a compressor does, okay? Because with a compressor, you can kill a sound or you can make it sound really wonderful, okay? A compressor is super important when used. It's like salt. Okay, if you're cooking and you're putting in salt and you put in too much, you can't take it out of there. Okay, so if you're recording with compression, you have to be super careful, because if you record it and it's over compressed, you can't fix that later. The dynamics are just not going to happen for that. So you want to use it like salt. You want to use it just to taste, if at all. Okay, and because if a vocalist has great mic technique, then you may not need a compressor. And what I mean about mic technique is singing on a microphone. I always tell somebody either that I'm new working with or that I know is new to recording, and it just so happens I have a handy little mic here. So I tell people to act like the microphone is somebody they care about's ear. Okay, if you want to be sexy and sultry on the mic and you want to get in and it's like, hey, da, 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 right? You can get in there because you would do that to somebody's ear. You would get close to them, right? But if you're yelling at somebody, then you don't want to do that to somebody you care about's ear. And it's the same thing with a microphone. You want to give it some space, right? So mic tech means you can have the same volume going to the mixer all the time just by repositioning yourself on the microphone and coming in closer and just leaning back. And you don't have to like run across the room to get distance on the microphone if you're a belting voice. Just leaning back, giving it about maybe a foot, is a great amount of airspace for the vocal to be okay on the microphone. Because super nice microphones also will be damaged by loud volumes and screams and stuff like that. So you really want to kind of take care of that with the microphone. And that's mostly with condenser mics and things of that nature. Thank you, Mr. Microphone. So what ends up happening is the signal's coming into the microphone, and sometimes you need to level out the volume that's coming in. And that's what a compressor does. Okay, a compressor, if we pull back up this screen, the compressor has these controls. Most compressors always have these controls. They have a threshold, which is when is the compression going to start. They have a ratio, a makeup volume, an attack, and a release. Okay, the ones you almost always see are the attack, the release, the ratio, and the threshold. Okay, and let's see, this is on a bass track. Yeah, let me just see if I can solo up this track and we can give an example of what it would be like to do this. This is the bass DI, so let's play some bass and see if we've got some signal going. Oh, that's funny. Okay, stand by. Okay. There it is. Hello. Hi, everybody. The audio should be back. Let me know if you hear anything or not. Give me a little note on the chat, because we should be back. And then I'll recap everything I was pantomiming before. Sorry about that. Okay. I'm going to type in here. Okay. Can't hear anything. Audio back. Okay, so we should be back in business with the audio. I see that it's happening. I see that it's going through. Okay, cool. Alrighty, now let's jump back into the show. I think we only lost a little bit when I went to actually pull up the screen for the mixer. So I should be back now. You should have the video and you should have audio. Chime in if it's cool. Let me know back. Okay, so you guys should be hearing me now. Somebody chime in and let me know if the audio is there. It should be happening. And we'll get back to the show. Thanks. All right, cool. Sweet. Okay, everybody's back on. Hey, what's happening, Sydney? And cool. All right, so we're back. So basically where you lost the audio is when I went over to the screen here to play some music. And what I was talking about was compressors. And so I'm going to just briefly go back through it, because since you guys didn't hear me, it doesn't help at all, right? Okay, so let's go back to the screen. And I was talking about bass tracks. And talking about the importance of a compressor. Okay, so the compressor is super important to what you're trying to do. And you can see it on the middle of the screen here. And these are the controls you almost always see. You see the threshold, which controls when it's going to start compressing, the ratio of how much it's going to compress in dB for every dB that comes in, and the attack time, when the compressor is going to start, and the release time is when it's going to let go. Okay, so sweet. Okay, so just to recap, which you guys couldn't hear because of my technical errors. Sorry about that. You know, it's the world of technology. This happens. But anyway, talking about compressors. It's kind of like the analogy that I was giving is, it's kind of like the two of us are at a fence, okay, and it's a gate into my backyard, okay. And if you are hearing this, then it's cool. Okay, so a compressor says for every dB or for every pound you push to go through the gate, I'm going to give you a certain ratio back. Okay, so if you push 1 pound of pressure, I'm going to give you a 2-to-1 pressure back. Okay, so as you come through my fence, it's going to be more regulated. It's going to be more smooth. So as you push, it's going to be a constant ratio. Okay, and the threshold is, when am I going to start pushing back? Am I going to let you get halfway into my backyard before I start compressing at the gate, or am I going to start right away? That's your attack time. Okay, so the threshold is, when am I going to start? The attack time is, how fast am I going to start doing it, right? How fast am I going to apply that? The ratio is the choice of how many pounds of pressure back for each pound you push, or how many dBs of reduction I'm going to give back for your dB forward, dB level. That's the ratio. And it's going to be constant. If you push harder, I'm still just going to keep a 2-to-1 ratio. Okay, it stays that way, and it tends to make it smooth. Okay, and then the release time is, once you get through the gate, how long is it going to take for the gate to close? Is it going to be nice and smooth, or is it going to close right away behind you? Okay, and on more legato material, you kind of want to have a longer release time, because then you won't hear it pumping and breathing from one line of singing to the next line of singing. Okay, so that's what's happening with a compressor. And the difference, there's a lot of confusion sometimes between a compressor and a limiter. Okay, and whereas I was saying a compressor is a constant ratio, okay, the limiter is going to change the ratio to limit you. So if you're back to the analogy of you walking through the fence, the gate with me, okay, and I say, I'm only going to let you peek into the backyard, I'm not going to let you all the way in. then no matter how hard you press, I'm going to press even harder back. I'm going to change my ratio to make sure that no matter what you do, you don't get any farther than this. And that's really good for outputs of consoles a lot of times, so that you can't blow up speakers down the line or amplifiers down the line. You can limit the entire total mix. You can use them on individual tracks as well. All of these are to taste, okay? And okay, cool. Okay, just a little bit. Okay, so let me see then. If you're getting just a little bit, let me get you a little bit more than 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That should be better. As far as aux 3 and 4, that should be a lot better audio coming out now. Okay, good. Alrighty. So that is what a compressor is doing versus a limiter. And I had it on a bass track, and I want to pull up that bass track again so that you can kind of hear it. Okay, this is the song New Kind of Funky. This is from the record The 12 Rhythms, and I have a bass part that's being played by Ron Battle. And so then he's playing, and you should be hearing this. Yeah, okay, you can hear that coming back. And now I'm going to change the compression around a little bit. Get rid of the XR. So now, as I change the threshold, you're going to hear it compress a bit more. Okay? And as you hear it go the other way, it's going to sound smoother. All right? Okay, cool. And then your makeup gain, attack release, and your main output is how much you want to go. So I don't want to spend a boatload of time on compressors. But this is just a basic thing. And typically just getting about 3 to 5 dB of compression is kind of a cool thing. Okay? So we'll leave that at that. Okay? So what's nice about having this, that's the whole track. So that is basically a compressor, and with the different elements of a compressor. And like I was saying before when you couldn't hear me, there's Paul. What's happening, Paul? I was saying it in the silence. I gave a perfect example of what's the difference between compression and limiting, Paul, but my mic wasn't on. So we'll move on to the next thing. No, I'm just kidding. Paul's a really great cat, great guitar player, and a great audio person, engineering type guy. Great cat, Paul Freudenberg. The difference, again, is that a compressor is a constant ratio for the input signal that's coming in, and a limiter is a variable ratio to keep the audio from getting over a certain limit or a certain level. Okay, so a compressor is going to ride the signal as it comes through, but the ratio stays the same, the 2 to 1 ratio or 2.5 or maybe even 3 to 1 ratio, it's going to stay the same. But a limiter says, as you get louder, I'm just going to have more and more ratio to keep you from going over a certain limit. Okay, and like I was saying before, these are all like salt. Okay, if you're recording with a compressor or if you're recording with limiting, which I don't know how many times you would do that, but if you're recording with these, they're like salt. If you put in too much compression when you record the vocal, you can't uncompress it later in the mix. It's just going to sound bad. And audio violent is very, very sorry. Silent. I wonder why that is. I'm showing a ton of volume here, and I'm showing a ton of volume going out. Is the same for everybody? The audio is silent for everybody? Because I'm showing I'm peaking out over here. Let's see. Is it still low? Okay, so it's much better now? Okay, good. All right. Sorry about all the technical difficulties. I'm trying a new interface this time, and it's just being an interface. But you should have a ton of level now. It's much better now. Okay, cool. Thanks, Bodo. Okay, great. Okay, so again, the compressor, constant ratio, limiter, variable ratio to keep from going over a certain limit. Okay, so if we go back and let's talk about the next thing, which would be an EQ. And I'm going to pull that up here so you can see it. All right, sweet. Thanks. Eric, what's happening, man? Thanks for joining in. So we have an EQ. And in EQ, you have different kinds of bands. These are all called bands in an EQ. Okay, and you have on the top, you have a low pass filter, and on the bottom you have a high pass filter, and this lets anything over this frequency through. It's letting the highs pass. Okay, and this is a low pass filter. Anything below that filter is not going to is a low pass filter. Anything under that is going to get through, and anything over that frequency is not going to go through. That's the difference between a low pass and a high pass. This is a shelved band. These are parametric. And what's fun about, things is that EQs, you can say, okay, this is the Q point. The center point is 2500 hertz, 2.5K. All right. So if I say, okay, I want to pinpoint something, I can change the Q. And the Q is the quiescent point of a EQ band. Okay, it decides how much around that frequency is going to be affected by you adding or cutting the gain. Okay, so like in this example that I just showed on the screen, this is a tight Q, it's not affecting that much. This is even more tight, almost like a notch filter. So if I wanted to notch out something, I could do that and just affect a few frequencies. But if I want to widen the Q, then I go ahead and bring it out like this, and now you can see I'm affecting a lot more frequencies and being a more general kind of term. So you have these multiple bands in here for your EQs, and you can choose and move them around as you wish. And sometimes people ask me, okay, what's the specific frequency for this or for that? And the answer ultimately is that if it sounds right, you did it right. That's the down and dirty answer. There's a lot of science to an EQ, but what I would suggest if you're unsure, there's some frequencies that are kind of pertinent. The 1K area. 1.2K is here in your nose. This is a very nasally 1.2K thing. And if I take away 1.2K, now my voice gets back warm again, okay? So 60 hertz is what's coming through the wall in the States, 50 hertz in Europe. It's not a bad frequency to hear in the right context. So those 100 hertz, if you think about stereos that you've known for years, and typically, the bass knob is 100 hertz and the treble knob is 10K in general. Sometimes the treble knob is 10K and it's 80 hertz on the lows, but in general, it's around those two ranges. Okay, 10 or 12K on the top and 80 or 100 hertz on the bottom. Okay, so think of it in those terms. What I suggest to people is sometimes you take a track of music that you know and you just kind of start playing with it. And you'll go, oh, this is what that sounds like, or this is not what that sounds like. This is what happens if I take away the frequency or add it. And so let's try that on a vocal track and just see what actually happens here. So, because we have some cool backup parts on this song. This, like I said, it's a new kind of funky. And this is Elizabeth Hangen, who is a great, great vocalist. And so, this is a section that we did of backup vocals. Yeah, didn't want to do that. So what ends up happening is we have all of these different kinds of tracks going on just for backup vocals. And I'm hoping you guys can hear those clearly. Because when you use EQ and compression together on an individual vocal track, and then you combine them with other tracks and you double them and you triple them, you can have some really fat vocals going on. And sometimes Elizabeth and I had 24 tracks of backup vocals going on. So, no, his old message. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to check over here really quickly. I'm going to pop up this screen real quick while I go ahead and look. I want to see about any comments on YouTube, if anybody's hanging out over there. Audio is really way better. Okay, audio is good. Thanks, Alexander. Okay, cool. All right, sweet. All right, that's what I wanted to know. All right, so I want to press on with what's happening here. And we're talking about your mix. Now, if you're in the chat, what are the things you're having problems with in your mix? Okay, is it getting the vocals on top? Is it compression? Is it, just getting the balance? Because there's a lot of different mentalities to different genres of music when it's mixing. And typically the things that I get when people are asking me are they have noise in their mix, they have trouble getting the vocals on top, they're having trouble with effects, and delays and things of that nature. And those are the typical suspects. And so we're going to go through those. Getting your vocal on top of the mix is a lot easier than you think it would be. Okay. What tends to happen, especially if you're an engineer that's a musician and you're doing your own music, is even more complicated, is you get the drums sounding great first, right? And then the drums sound amazing and they sound really cool. And then you add in the bass, and you know, the kick drum on this sounds fat and the snare is nice and crispy. And then you add in the bass and you want that to be fat, and you know, and you put some low end on that, right? And then you have a piano player or a B3 player or a Rhodes player, and you want that left hand to kind of work it out within some nice mid-range chords as well, right? And then after that, you want to have the guitars, which really want to come through cool, you know? So you get all of this rhythm section happening, and you get it sounding great, and it's pumping through the speakers, and you're loving life. And then you try to get the vocal on top of it, and it's just, you're clipping before you can get anywhere with the vocals, okay? The reason is because you thought of the band first. So I always go back to the mentality of, what is it I'm selling? Am I selling the vocalist? Am I selling the band? Are they all together? Am I selling the songwriting? Am I selling the actual story? Am I a storyteller? Okay, and those things, you approach mixes different ways with it. Or am I a guitar band and the vocals are completely secondary? Okay, you mix depending on what it is you're trying to sell. And I made the analogy before of a movie. Okay, mixing music is just like making a movie, right? And I said this last week, and I'll just briefly repeat it because it is really important. In a movie, you have the star, you have the co-star, you have a couple of other actors that are kind of supporting actors, best supporting actors, and then you have the rest of the cast that has to be there, because otherwise the movie would look really silly without, you know, the cars on the streets and the people in the restaurants and all those things, you know, and all the extras and things like that. Those are all necessary. The supporting actors are necessary, the co-star is necessary, and the star is necessary. So you have to figure out for your mix what each of those roles are. If you're a super amazing guitar player, maybe the guitar is the star and the co-actor is the vocal. So it's just a little bit before the guitar, or vice versa. But in the scenario of not being able to get your vocal on top of the mix, the simple solution is to go ahead and turn everything down. Just turn all the volumes down, right? And then bring up the vocal. And it's like, here it is. Sounds great in my mix. And a lot of people, it's surprising how many people don't approach it from that angle. But bring up the vocal and then start bringing up the drums, especially if you have them on a group where they're automation, or they're you have them grouped together. The faders are grouped together so that you bring up one fader and all the drums come up, you know, on a subgroup. You can bring up the drums with the vocal up, and you'll instantly start hearing when it's starting to crowd the vocals. Okay, and then you go, oh, it's a little too much drums. Okay, I'm starting to lose the vocal. And then you bring up the bass, and then you bring up the keys, and you bring up the other elements in there. It could be an orchestra, you know, it could be all these different elements. But if you're selling the vocal, bring that up first so you know you have it. You know you can sell it. It's there. It's right on top. And then you can bring up the other cast members underneath it to support that star. And then you can start to actually get your mix and start filling out things. And there's a couple of different aspects to getting that star to pop through the screen. Okay, one of those aspects is actually, there's pure volume, right? But if you have everything in the middle, and oh, stand by, hold on one second. I want to just double check. Okay, cool. Okay, so you want to have volume for the main actor, and then you can bring down the other volumes to make space for the main vocal. Let's just stay in music terms. For the vocal to pop through, you bring down all the rest of them. But if everything's in the middle, it's still kind of crowded in that space, right? And the world isn't like that. If you go to a concert, the sound is wide. It might be a mono PA, but off of the stage, the sound is wide. You know, and the drum set is panned. if you're staring at the stage, the hi-hat's to the right as you look at the stage, right? And then the snare, and then the toms, the floor tom is more to the left if you're facing the stage, right? And then the guitars and stuff, they're going to be panned out. You want to do that with your mix also, okay? And if you like everything in the middle, that's fine, go for it, you know, because it is your mix and you can decide how you want it to be. But panning is the second thing about how to make your vocal pop, okay? Give it some space. If the vocal is in the middle and you have two guitars, let's just say, pan them at 10 and 2. And that way you're going to hear the guitars and the vocal's still going to cut right through, right? And then you put the keys a little bit wider, you know, maybe at 8 o'clock and 4 o'clock or something, and put a delay on one to have it a little wider, okay? And the kick drum is still going to be in the center. The bass is still going to be in the center because you're making a frequency stack as well, with the low frequencies in the center and the bottom, and then the high ones on the top and the middle, okay? And then you can create those frequency stacks around the mix as well. There's another thing called frequency holes, okay? And by that, if it's like a record like mine and I have guitar products, you know, I have tons of guitar tracks. It's my record, right? So Victor Orlando is in the house. What's up? Y'all need a great percussionist. Victor is the cat. What is going on, brother? Thanks for joining in, man. He's an LA cat. Okay, so by making a frequency hole, if I know that the singer's voice, the sibilance of the voice is about 4.5 K for a lot of people, not everybody. And what I mean about that is sibilance is the ability to hear words crisp and clear. Okay? And if you have these other things in the same frequency band, it's going to confuse it. Okay? And it's going to be in the way of the vocal. So what we'll actually do sometimes is we'll notch out a little 4.5 K out of the guitars. You're still going to know it's an electric guitar. It's still going to sound great. And in the chorus, you can make it bigger and things. And of course, the guitar solo, you make it a guitar solo and you get that tone. But during the verse, you notch a hole in the guitar for the vocal to sing through. And then that way the guitars can be here and the vocal can be here. They can all play and, you know, kind of hold hands and, you know, be all on the same level, but you'll hear the vocal cut through because the guitar has made a space in its sound for it. We've made a frequency hole for the vocal to cut through. So that's kind of a fun way to do it. You know, so you have panning as a means to get the vocal to come through. You have volume as a way for the vocals to come through. You have frequency holes as a way for the vocal to come through. And also, you have the arrangement of the sound, it's the song itself. Okay? If I'm writing a song and I'm singing and playing in the same key, actually, let me see if I can bring one over here really quick without killing everything in my setup here. Stand by. Okay, so if I'm singing a song, ooh, this is badly out of tune. And if I'm singing a song and I'm in the key of G, let's just say, and I'm singing in the key of G, and I'm right here in the chord. And my arrangement of the song has me singing in the exact same arrangement of the chord. It can be difficult to hear what I'm singing, and you can't really understand what I'm saying, right? And it's a little difficult, okay? But if I go, and I'm playing a different octave of the same chord, and if I say, now I'm singing and you can understand what I'm singing because the notes are higher, you know, and you can change it around. Or if I'm down here, and I can sing along, make the song alone now, you know, and so I can make the arrangement of the song so that it's not fighting the other chords and still have a great guitar sound and still have a vocal that comes on top, okay? So the... Vinny, yeah, no problem. So the idea is there's basically 4 ways to get whatever it is you're selling to the front of the mix, okay? And that is the 4 things I told you: volume, panning, frequency holes, or the arrangement of your song, okay? there's other things like reverb. Reverb is kind of misinterpreted a lot, I think, because reverb is supposed to be an actual environment, okay, like a spatial environment that this is in, okay. So if, let's just say that we're, let's see, this is an international audience, so I've got to think of, like a basketball court, that's international. If we're in a big room, in a big gymnasium, okay, or a big concert hall by ourselves, and you're standing close to me, there's not going to be a lot of reverb between you and me if we're like a couple of meters apart. If somebody's standing 10 feet, like a stagehand or somebody, or another band member, is standing 10 feet or 3 meters behind you, and now they're 5 meters away from me, and we're in this big room, they're going to have more reverb on their voice. I'm going to perceive it. They don't have more reverb on their voice. It's just a human voice. But my ears are going to perceive that they're farther away, even if I don't have my eyes open, because I'll hear the reverb. The person in front of me will sound closer because they have less reverb, and the other people will sound farther away because they have more reverb. And that's in a natural space. That's not mixing. Same principle can be applied. If you want things to sound in the very front of the mix, if you have to have reverb on it, make sure it has less reverb than the things that you want to have supporting that star. Okay, and then you want to have this clash of reverbs going on, and everybody sounds washed out, and there's no definition to the mix. If I'm selling that vocal. I have a star, right? Or I have a guitar solo, and they can change throughout the song, which is fun. A guitar part can be kind of washy and a little bit of reverb and stuff, but the guitar solo track, when it comes time for that, now it needs to be up front. So now you can change the volume now, because now it's the star. And now you can get rid of the frequency holes because I want that guitar sound. Okay? And then you can pan it however you want to pan it, maybe still in stereo, or maybe you want to bring it more towards the center for the guitar solo, right? And you want to have the less reverb so it sounds more up in front. Okay? And this way you can it's kind of like, Peter Gabriel is great at showing flashcards, basically. He's going to let you hear a groove, okay? And then he's going to tuck it away in the song, because once your ear hears it, it's kind of going to always hear it. It's psychoacoustics, okay? And you can do that in music. So if you have the rhythm guitar part has more reverb on it, it sounds more distant. Now you walk up front for the guitar solo, and after the guitar solo, you go more distant again. And this is how you can have a perspective of depth, as well as of panning, as well as volume in your mix. And also frequency is going to decide things. Low frequency items are going to sound more concentrated and everything, like a kick drum. And even on a kick drum, it's like, do you want the thud or the thwack? Do you want, like if you're miking a kick drum, okay, how close to the beater head are you? Do you want it off axis so it sounds like a more rounded kind of kick drum sound? Or do you want to hear that thwack when you put the mic on the other side of the beater head, so when he hits it, it's giving a good thwack? Or any combination between. So all these elements of frequency, panning, volume, these are the things that you're painting your picture with. Okay, so and that was one of the things that I love about music, is we all start with this blank canvas, and sometimes it just seems like people just throw music at it, and that in and of itself is an art form, to just throw things at the painting and see what comes up. Okay, that's one. Or if you're trying to create a nice picture with nice context, and it's thought out ahead of time, you got to decide things. Let's say we're making a painting of a barn in a field. Okay, well, are there trees in that field? Are there animals? Is it a barn? Is there cows in that field? Or is it not? Or is it winter? Is it summer? Are there birds around? Is it snowing? Is it fall? All these kind of things you get to decide when you're making this picture. And it's the same with audio. You can decide how bright you want some things to be. Where do you want them to be in the mix? But ultimately, it still comes back to what is it you want to sell. And once you decide that, your mixing process becomes exponentially easier because now you have a path, now you have a plan for what's going to happen. So when you start pulling up faders, you know which ones are important, and Sydney uses multiple mics on a kick drum. Absolutely. I mean, you can have multiple mics on kick drum. We can talk about miking techniques. We're going to do that. Sydney, if you want to have, you guys and ladies, if you're checking it out and you want me to cover anything in specific, let me know. Send it in the chat, and this is for you all, so I would love to talk about anything you're interested in. So if you have suggestions for topics, have at it. Let me know. So if it's a miking technique, Sydney, you can use 2 mics. You can have 2 mics on the kick and a remote. It's like, for instance, on a guitar speaker, I might have a 421 and a Royer ribbon microphone on the speaker, very close to the speaker, but not out of phase with each other. And then I might have another stereo microphone, or 2 mics in an XY pattern, meters away in the middle of the room, so that I get the close sound and I get the room sound. And then what's fun about that is now I have 4 channels just for the guitar to decide how I want to present that. Do I want it to have a nice tight sound, or I can give it more of a room sound and not have to add reverb? I just have the room sound. So multiple mics are really cool, and you can get into a whole science of mic techniques and everything like that. And I kind of, for me, myself, I'm kind of in the middle. I'll get all interested in all these miking techniques and everything, and then I'll listen to an old Frank Sinatra record or something where it's a bunch of cats in a room, a couple of mics thrown up in the right places, and that record still sounds amazing today. They still hold up because these guys knew where to put the mics, and there's tons of bleeding, but you have to realize that these guys are not punching in parts either. They're playing the song top to bottom, and they're playing it great, and that's fun. More bands in the studio without punching and everything and actually bouncing off of each other is a super fun thing. So that's kind of the experience you want to have. And if you like the other side of it, where you get to have the ability to punch in and correct things or have different takes and stuff like that, that's fine as well. It's all about, there's so many approaches. But I will say something about vocalists. When you're recording vocalists, in my experience, there's a couple of different kinds of vocalists, and both are great. This is not like a I hate this or I hate that conversation about vocalists, and no jokes intended or anything like that. But a vocal instrument is the most fragile instrument and the most expressive, right? So a vocalist typically can either say, I'm going to sing the song from top to bottom, or I'm going to sing a verse at a time, okay? Or the other kind of vocalist says, I want to do this line by line, and we're going to double it and triple it, and if it's Mary had a little lamb and I don't like the word had, I want to punch that word in. So some people are super precision, and some people are super, I want to just sing it and you get what I'm singing. You're going to get the raw take, and that's what we're printing, And the only caution I will give about both of those is that if somebody is singing the song top to bottom and they're singing the track, let's just say they sing the track 5 times and it's an intense song that really wears on their voice, okay? Their voice is going to change because it's getting more tired, it's getting more strained, or because it's warming up and really getting into that range. So if you're taking 4 or 5 takes of this song and you want to chop it up, you want to comp vocals. Comping vocals is making a composite of a lot of different parts of these different tracks. So if I have 5 takes of a singer singing the exact same song, I can say, you know what? On take number 2, I really like the first half of, My Baby Says She Really Loves Me. I really like the My Baby of take 2. But I like Says is really strong out of take 4, and She Loves Me of take 1. I can comp those together, okay, and make a vocal track. And if you're going to do that with somebody that has to sing the song all the way through, those takes are going to start sounding different. The timbre of the voice is going to change. So sometimes if you do 5 takes, you grab the middle 3 or something like that and use those for most of your comping. On the other hand, if you have somebody that can punch in just one word, okay, and they're going to sing along with the other track and you just punch in that word. But the thing about punching is that it's like acting. You have maybe I have some acting analogies coming from LA. I guess. I mean, I'm broadcasting from lovely Switzerland, but in LA there's a lot of actors around and we're all friends and stuff. So maybe that's where these analogies come from. But when you're punching in vocals or guitar parts or whatever it is, you have to be able to have that exact same emotion as the take before. So if you're doing a really heartfelt song and it has this really remorseful or sad tone or a super high and happy, accomplished sound, like, yeah, you need to be able to punch in with that exact same timbre, that exact same energy. And that in and of itself is a craft, to be able to punch. Okay? So, and punching, you want to be able to do it quickly. In the days of 2-inch tape, you had all the time in the world to think between takes, because put my guitar down here. Because on a 2-inch tape machine, it would shuttle back to the beginning of the song and it would go a little bit back past it, and you had a good 15-20 seconds to collect your thoughts between one take and the next. Well, with digital, it's a marker. You just go back to it, it auto records from there, and you have no time to think. So it's a little more pressing to be ready to punch in today's world than it used to be. Or if you're still tracking with 2-inch, and some rooms are, there's a great bunch of rooms in LA, and I used to co-manage one with a guy named Drew Berlin there, and that's a great 2-inch room still. And if you can do that, then it's fine. You can do those kinds of things. So the idea is to really take care of the mentality of your mix. Okay, so it's coming up with 8 minutes left. Okay, cool. We have some other cool people in, and thanks for the message, Eric. And I'm going to go ahead and read that and respond to that in just a second. But I want to wrap up this show, with just kind of regrouping about what's wrong with my mix. Ultimately. And it's funny because you can be in the middle of a mix and hear the mix walk away from you while you're mixing. You'll adjust something and the mix just starts walking away from you. And that's the other thing, is what's your mix environment? Okay? Typically, you should be mixing on 3 or 4 different sets of speakers. And I know you're going, well, yeah, maybe you're rich and you can afford 3 or 4 sets of speakers, but I don't have that. Or I have 6 sets and you're only talking about 4. Either way. But you do have 3 sets of speakers, okay? Because if you can't walk your mix, and by that I mean it sounds great in your room, in your studio, whether it's a bedroom, a facility, whatever, okay? It sounds great in that room. And then you take a demo of it, a CD of it, or a AIF or WAV file, to somebody else's place, and all of a sudden it sounds terrible, then you're not mixing accurately in your room. And you don't have to necessarily spend a ton of money to get your room balanced so that it's actually, there's a ton of things about, how to treat your room and how to get it, leveled so that it's an even playing field. You're actually hearing all frequencies evenly when you're mixing. But a lot of rooms don't have that. But you have to know your room, okay? A lot of people have worked with a lot of great things and just, it's like a race car. I'm sorry, I'm the analogy man, but it's like a race car. If you know that this car tends to fight you on left-hand turns more than it does on right-hand turns, okay, then you know how to adjust for that. You do the same with your room. If you walk your mixes to some other places and you go, man, they're always sounding so bassy, okay, you know that you can do one of 2 things. You can lower the bass in your mix, Or you can have an EQ on your speakers that's adding bass, so it sounds great in your room, but what you're actually cutting doesn't have that EQ in it. So then when you walk out, it's going to be, end effect is going to be less bass because you're hearing more of it when you mix. So you're actually compensating for it, and then it'll walk fine, because that's super important, right? So you have maybe a nice pair of speakers that you want to have for mixing, okay? And then those are playback monitors, which are kind of like home stereo monitors, and then you want some near field monitors. If I had to pick, I would buy some near fields, because there's tons of examples of playback monitors out there. If I have near field monitors and they develop a picture, an audio picture really quickly, like within a meter, meter and a half, and you make this triangle between the speakers and you get a good near field speaker, that's going to be critical, because we all have the Bible, which is your car. You put it in your car and you mix it and you listen in the car and you're like, yep, sounds great in the car, or it doesn't sound great in the car. Let me go back and mix, because we all know the car. We know the sound in our earbuds when we listen to music off of our phones or iPods or whatever it is you may have, what you listen to phones and earbuds. Or if you have a Bluetooth speaker, all these different things. And what I actually used to do, I still do. I have, like right around here, I have a terrible little clock radio that has an audio input, and it has two really terrible little 3-inch speakers in them, okay? But I know what produced music sounds like through that, okay? I can put a CD on and play it through it, and I go, oh, okay, that's Sting, Michael Jackson, whoever, Shakira. I know I know what that sounds like. So I'm going to put my mix in and see if it kind of stands up frequency-wise, if it sounds cool, because that's TV. You send it to a TV, and most home stereo systems are huge, great systems. But if it sounds good on an AM kind of sound, well, not AM, but if it sounds good on a small speaker as well as the big speakers, you can be pretty confident that you can walk that mix elsewhere. So this has been the show about not just how to fix a mix, but how to pay attention to your mix and make sure that you're not abusing things like reverbs and sending all these things to reverb. Sometimes you may have a reverb on a snare that sounds really great, and then you want a little bit on the kick, and then you want a little bit over here, and you have a different reverb for the snare than for the kick, and you want a different snare for the cymbals than you would, Man, there's engineers that can make that happen, and it's awesome. And that's one way to do it. And then the other way is to send all of the drums as a 2-mix to a reverb, and then put the drums in an environment where they all get treated like real world, like they're sitting in a big room or a small room or something like that. Which is why when you see on the reverb choices, it says small drum room, wooden room, plate sound, like an EMT plate, okay? And that's a really fun big chunk of metal that sits on a wall, and you have to tune it, and it's a great reverb thing. But now we have the benefit of having these as plugins and things of that nature. So, again, just to recap, mixing is like a movie. You want to decide what you're selling, who the star is, who the co-star, who the supporting actors are, and who are the extras. That's going to be important. I mean, it's like, I have a track, like if you listen to New Kind of Funky, which is the title track, well, not title track, it was the single off of the 12 Rhythms of Mine. Originally, there was 126 tracks on that song. Because like I said, Elizabeth and I did 24 tracks of just backup vocal stacks. Okay, and it was like 3 or 4 part harmony, 4 tracks of each, and it gets out of hand in a hurry, but it was so much fun. And then tons of guitar tracks and extra bass tracks. And we did all the rhythm section stuff in one day, or in 2 days, in LA. And then we did, punches, and then we did some other things to it. But all those tracks had to be managed. And I had to decide. I mean, there's a cat named Trey Balfour. He did some great percussion stuff on there. And so we had some other great guest people on the record, and Trey's another great percussionist in LA. And so, like Victor Orlando and Trey Balfour, look them up. These guys are great. So we had that. And I do have to mention, if you do listen to the track, or if you do buy it on iTunes, which would be hip, It's Ron Battle on bass, Elizabeth Hangen on backup vocals, Keith Williams on drums, Larry Houston on keys, myself on guitars and vocals. But these are some of the best players you're going to find. They're the cats, and so it's very cool. And then we had some great guests on the record as well. Find out what you're selling, and if you're having difficulties, find out what it's clashing with. Find out, solo things and go, the vocal's really fighting something. I can't decide what it is. So you solo the vocal. And then you start soloing the other thing. It's that rhythm guitar where I use the bridge pickup instead of the neck pickup. And that's fighting the vocal. Now you know what you're working with. Okay, so this has been today's musician with Phil Gates, and there wasn't much about health or anything like that. Well, you'll have your sanity if you can get your mix happening. That's the health. And also quickly, I kind of have a general rule because you can get lost in the minutia in a mix. Really fast, you can get lost, okay? And adjust things and adjust things and adjust things. And as artists today, we have to wear multiple hats. As an artist, we think every track is great. And it's like, it's all good, man. It's all beautiful. I want to keep everything, right? And as the producer hat, the job of the producer is to produce a viable product for that client, okay? So you have to take off the artist hat and put on the producer hat and go, we don't need all those tracks. 4 tracks of guitars is going to be fine for this record, okay? And a general rule I go by when I start really taking a long time with things is I have a 30% rule. And I go, if what I'm doing isn't going to make a 30% difference, I don't know that I need to be taking up all this time on it. If it's making a 1 or 2% difference, I don't know that I want to spend that much time. If it's 10%, maybe, but if it's just something that nobody is going to hear, you have to put on your producer hat and go, nobody's going to hear that, and, you have to chop off some tracks and cut away all the extra stone or wood or whatever it is to see the final craft that you've made that's been hiding in there all the time. So next week, give me some other suggestions about stuff. Otherwise, I'm going to pick a topic and we'll go on with next week. I think next week will be more with touring because there's a lot of people that are technically great that don't know how to tour. They don't know how to be on the tour bus. They don't know how to show up on time. They don't know how to be with the venues and how to present the band as a band with the venues and how to deal with press. And the press that's out there and booking agents and all those things. So maybe that'll be next week. All right, but anyway, I'm running a little bit long, but it's been super fun. Thanks everybody for jumping in. And this is today's musician with Phil Gates, and I will see you soon. Peace. I'm going to go ahead and drop my intro in one more time. Take it easy.